Okay, so it's 3:30. So what we'll do is we'll start now because it's an action-packed 45 minutes. My name's Martin Gill. Welcome to our third Security Thought Leadership webinar. What does remote working mean for security? In the next 45 minutes, we'll be debating that issue with 4 leading security experts from around the world. And the idea of thought leadership is to think critically, to think differently, to critique what's going on, to develop new insights, to enable us to debate what a future security might look like. One thing we know for sure, that things are changing and the quality of what we get in the future will depend in part on how good the debate is about those issues now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite the audience to ask any questions. If you have any questions, please use the question and answer tab on at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat tab, and you're welcome to talk to one another during the next 45 minutes. If you've got questions, put them in the questions and answer. We may well pick up on them. I'm going to ask each of the 4 panelists to introduce themselves, just do that. And once they've all done that, all 4 of them, what we'll then do is ask each of them to make an opening statement. We have experts from different parts of the world with different expertise. And I'm very grateful for them to give up their time to come and join the panel. So let me start off by asking Linda first. Linda, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Martin. Dr. Linda Florence. Martin asked me to give a short background. So my doctorate is in industrial and organizational psychology with a workplace violence focus primarily. I am what I guess you would call a virtual CSO, been a CSO for a couple of different organizations and currently work as an independent contractor, focusing on healthcare right now. There's a lot of workplace violence issues, so it's quite busy. And I am currently on the Standards and Guidelines Commission and also on the board of directors for the ISPO. Thank you.
Mike.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Reddington. I'm the Chief Executive of the British Security Industry Association, and I have over 25 years experience in the security industry sector.
Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Tyson. I am currently the owner of Apollo Information Systems. We're a cybersecurity consulting firm, and as a former ASIS president and a ISSA on the cybersecurity side, executive director, I've got probably an end-to-end view of what I think the industry looks like.
And finally, Samuele.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Samuele Caruso. I'm actually working in Fincantieri, the big company for naval construction, where I'm responsible for travel security and crisis management abroad. I've been in the security sector for 20 years right now, so I'm 44, all my life and all my career.
Thank you very much indeed, Samuele. You won't be able to see Samuele because we're having slight trouble with his videos, so we've asked him to join audio only. Okay, I'll now ask each of our panelists for a short 4 minutes opening statement about the issue. Linda, your thoughts first, please.
Thank you. Well, the first thing, the question was posed was, what are the risks posed for security by working remote? And I'd like to start off by saying in our profession, that's not always possible. At the operational level, we have people on the ground protecting assets. And even though a lot of the office workers may be working from home, those assets still need to be secured and protected. Then we also have those professions that are literally on the front line, such as the healthcare, security, first responders. So they're putting themselves at risk to combat this current situation. So I think we have to find a balance there. And so we as a profession are being forced into very different paradigms. I think security is usually the first ones there and the last ones to go. And so that's not any different right now. If anything, the resources are being stretched more than ever before. I've had conversations with several colleagues over the last couple of weeks about this very topic. There's quite a demand right now for additional staff, for contract security officers, as well as some on the IT side, which that's not my area of expertise. I'll leave that to Dave. But what I see within the organizations, excuse me, that I'm currently working with is that people are stepping up and filling more of a security-related role because they never had to before, but now it's becoming more prominent. And I think we're seeing that the security of the organizations themselves and of the operations, continuity of operations, is at the forefront of everyone's mind. So people are filling into those roles, and they may not necessarily have the expertise to do so. So we as professionals are being called on even more. I think the good news about all this is that business continuity is coming to the forefront. So individuals and organizations that were never prepared will no longer think that we're quite that crazy for always being prepared for a crisis. And that this is kind of what we're built for, is a crisis. But that said, I don't think we've ever seen anything to this magnitude. Previously, we've had individual or regionalized issues with, terrorist events and weather-related events. 9/11 rocked the U.S., but it's very different in different parts of the world, where you have different types of crises, either natural or man-made. However, this is the first time the entire world has been affected. So there's no one to go to except yourselves. So that's the shift that I see this time around, which could present both challenges and opportunities.
Linda, thank you very much indeed, Linda. Mike, your opening statement, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think while remote working isn't new to everybody, the level of remote working that's increased since the COVID-19 pandemic has seen a dramatic increase of remote workers. And for those people, as offices are locked down and people are moving to remote or home working, they need to adapt to the change in their working environment. They also need to ensure they have the relevant equipment to be able to undertake their activities, and also identify whether all the functions that they have previously undertaken are capable of doing. They have to be aware of data and the usage of data, so then they're compliant with the GDPR requirements. They need to be aware of the cybersecurity and the risk around cybersecurity. I think how to actually respond to those is, I think those that are new to remote working should actually learn from their colleagues who may have done remote working previously and have experience of it. I think organizations need to create a virtual team culture for remote workers, keeping in contact with them, being aware of their health and well-being. It's also to ensure that they are operating appropriately with data and data access and storage. For example, not storing data locally and storing it either on remote servers or in the cloud, to make sure they're compliant with GDPR. Be very aware of the cybersecurity risks in terms of phishing emails and unauthorized website access. And ensure that the employees have all the appropriate equipment to undertake their operations. I think from a good practice would be that organizations have very clear guidelines for remote workers. As I said previously, they're in regular contact with their team to enable them to adapt to their new working environment. Check that the correct operation around data is being adhered to, and also the cyber security knowledge is there. And for individuals to have set working hours, so they're in a working mindset when they're working remotely, and if possible, to have an established workstation or workplace at home.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. Dave Tyson.
Well, let's start off. One of the things I've been doing for the last couple of weeks is really talking to my clients, chief information security officers and chief security officers around primarily the US and Canada. And what we've heard on this end, I guess, is a number of things that people weren't prepared for. First, I think what we've learned is that the business continuity plans that were implemented and had been tested in some cases didn't work, didn't go as planned. There wasn't, I think to kind of what Linda said, I don't think everybody had sort of planned for this duration of an event. And so some paper processes are okay for a week or 2 weeks, but the duration of this type of an event has really put a lot of pain into it for folks. And so we've seen a number of folks who've really, now that they've actually been living this for a few weeks, it's been quite challenging. The other piece is that with the financial impact, the combination of the financial impact to organizations who are losing money, we see CIOs that are being asked to give back 50% of their budget. So not only are they struggling to operate in this environment, whether it's moving from 1,000 people or 300,000 who are now working from home, is in with some places, but they're being asked to give back money they've already spent, and they need to operate the business. So there's a dichotomy in approach in the business plan, and there's a little stress that's being created, and I wouldn't call it healthy stress, in how do we operate for weeks and or months. We see a lot of, depending on the country's own approach, fear tends to drive behavior. And so we see, we all want that remote access capability. We all want to be able to dial in and from home and connect to the systems. But what happens when the data center team that's responsible for keeping those remote systems up decides not to show up for the day? Because that's what happened to a Fortune 200 company. The 6 technicians who keep all the servers up decided one day to all call in sick because they were afraid of what might happen to them if they reported to work. So when we started to look at the continuity plans, in many cases, we assume, well, you might lose one person, you might lose 2. I don't think people have planned for losing everybody simultaneously at the same time. And so I think we've learned a lot from that process. And I think that Mike, articulated quite well the fact that during this, the attacks that we've seen and the phishing attacks and other types that are coming to the remote workers, I would echo that. I would say, we've seen an uptick of well over 80%, maybe a couple of 100% in some countries of attacks against the remote workers because they're not prepared for this type of volume. I think the other piece is that people are often using their equipment from home. In some cases, companies have just told employees to go out and buy their own laptop. In some cases, they haven't been able to scale up because laptop sales have not been available in certain jurisdictions. So I think what we've seen is a lot of people just trying to make it work, and they end up using technology that is less secure. And the questions I've asked of some folks have been like, how confident are you that the security that your remote workers are using are at the same level of it was before the crisis? And the answer generally is not very confident. And so, I think that is, I think that's a challenge for folks because they're busy trying to deal with both the crisis, the budget pressures, trying to keep the business up. In some cases, it's a volume thing for sure. You've got 300,000 employees. But the other piece is the business continuity plan often restricts communication. So now you have a massive uptake of security risk to the remote workers, and you've got an HR or a PR function saying, hey, we want to limit the messages down to the end user. And so our ability to let people know about the risks that they face from working from home is getting throttled. And so these are all challenges that I think that we'll have to look towards in the future and say, how are we going to do this differently going forward?
Dave, thank you very much indeed. Just to remind the audience, if you've got a question, please put it on the question and answer tab at the bottom rather than the chat one, because that's where we can see the questions on the question and answer. Okay, and my fourth opening statement is from Samuele from Italy. Samuele, over to you.
Oh, thank you. In these weeks, we saw a lot of companies that had to apply to switch to smart working. And of course, as also my colleague said, a lot of companies are not enough prepared to do it. Home Sweet Home does not apply to this situation. And in the same moment, we can see that the risks are the same as before, and the data we security guys are committed to fight are the same, but the situation changed very, very quickly. If you just consider, for example, the risk factors, because I do consider that we must start from the risk assessment. The external factors are the same, but the environment that we have to protect, we have to consider, is completely different. For example, we cannot trust the perimeter, both from a physical security and from an IT security perspective. So we cannot rely in a business continuity in case of any type of loss of energy, for example. And of course, there is not enough preparation in these days from our employees. So I think that it is really important to start thinking on rewrite the security policy also very quickly with a mix of a mix of solution. The base, I think, is in setting up a policy, a written and very clear policies on the behavior expected by the companies versus our employees. And it's also important to take in consideration very, very quickly to train everybody on the major risks posed at home by simple risk, like, for example, charging a personal device into the laptop of the company. A lot of risk are posed by very, very not common risk inside the company. What else? I think it's very important to verify that our employees are equipped with adequate protection. I think it's very different, for example, in the big companies like the company I work in, and little companies. Italy is full of little companies. Not everybody has a IT security manager, and also in big companies, not everybody is equipped with a VPN, just to make an example. So the security assessment has to be made again in these days, and very, very quickly, because the risks are the same, but the environment is very different.
Thank you very much indeed, Samuel. I appreciate your opening statements, each of you. Okay, so changing times, new challenges, and far from clear, the world has adapted quickly. We have a question here about manpower. And this strikes me as quite an important issue for the security sector from all this. And the question is along the lines of, since, as you said, though, Tyson, that CISOs are being asked to cut budgets, and you've mentioned that they're being asked to rely on less people. Do you think that afterwards there'll be a push to say, if in a crisis we need less people, then in a non-crisis we'll need even less? And the implications for security in the long run are not looking good. Dave Tyson, I'll come to you first.
I mean, I think the first question, Martin, to address that is, what's the model going to look for business, and how much of this COVID crisis operating model is going to carry over into the new world? How much of remote access has been proven as a legitimate way in which to do? And I think, you know, if I would think from a societal or social perspective, I mean, Linda's the expert here, but I would say that we're going to see cultural shift. And the question is how much cultural shift will happen, and how will that impact what we need to do? If you think about, you know, just, you know, the kinds of risks that face an organization, the first thing I would say is, how are we going to now, you know if someone is, you know, stealing insider information? Well, if everybody's working from home with their own equipment and it's BYOD or whatever, you know, that's a different set of security controls than what we have today, where we have a, you know, much more control around the network. So I think there will be a lot of questions we have to answer in terms of what does normal look like for us to be able to get to that, Martin.
Linda, your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with what Dave is saying, and picking up on that, I want to comment on the societal piece of it is, I think that the other side of this issue is going to look very different. Some people are actually going to like working from home. Many of us have been doing it for a long time, but it's not really everybody's cup of tea. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift of a balance in the workplace, where you have people that want to work remotely and maybe their job doesn't allow them to. There's going to be a little bit different influence peddling, if you will. One of the big things that CSOs and CISOs rely heavily on is being able to influence the other leaders in the organization for their programs, and to make security part of the culture. That's not as easy when you can't walk down the hall and talk to someone. So it's going to be a very different shift in that regard, that it's going to have to be a different media and making people responsible for themselves. And also to Dave's point about the lack of control. So if we don't have as much influence, obviously we're not going to have as much control. So I could see this, especially the cyber piece and the protection of information being a little harder to control than the physical side. The physical side we think we're pretty good at. However, as you pointed out, Martin, in your question, is there may be a perception that, well, we don't really need that many people now because we got through this crisis. We can rely more on technology, perhaps even access control and the physical barricades can be more prevalent so that we don't need as many people, because we're seeing now, to the other panelist point, that the one weakness in this whole plan, and as in most contingency and business resumption plans, is the people. If the people fail, the rest of the processes don't matter.
Mike, I'll come to you, Mike. Obviously, you've got big connections to the security world itself. At the moment, it seems a lot of the people you deal with are facing an increase in opportunities for security. In the long run, where do you think that will go?
I agree. I actually don't think it will have an adverse effect on the security sector once we come through the other side of this, and we inevitably will do. And I agree with what Linda and Dave have said. I think what may change is the way people are working, is there may be a greater acceptance of remote workers than there previously has been. And there'll be maybe an assessment of, do the jobs need to be office-based, or all the jobs need to be office-based? Could they be remote located? But they need to address the security risks that potentially come with that. You know, the policy of bring your own device may not be something that's adopted, but the technology provided by the organizations. We are seeing from our industry sector, from a physical side, a significant increase in demand. From an electronic side, a reduction in demand for engineers currently, because they're not allowed to access buildings. But as soon as we return to norm, we anticipate there will be a large increase, and all of that resource, we believe, will return to work.
Mike, thank you. I'm going to come to a different question for you, Samuel. Andrew Thorburn, who's tuning in from New Zealand, I have to say, it's some unearthly hour, asked a really important question about the mental health of workers as they stay at home for long periods. Of course, in Italy, you know a bit about lockdown. How are people faring, Samuel, in Italy in terms of mental health in the working from home under stress for longer periods? Samuel, are you there? Okay, seems to have lost Samuel, or it's gone quiet. So let me put that back.
Mute. I think he's on mute, Martin.
Oh, okay. We'll contact Samuel until he's on mute, so he might be trying to answer the question.
Okay.
Did you get the question, Samuel?
Yes, until, excuse me for bad line. I think that smart working has a big problem with the line.
So the question about mental health of workers.
The mental health of workers is really at risk, I can confirm you. It's not simple for everybody, and in Italy is the third week at home. It's not simple to stay at home, to work at this, and to shift from in a balance from work to non-work hours. The same is for the laptop. A lot of people today is using personal connectivity for both work and personal life. It's not simple to switch from one to the other. Mentally, I think people can be tired really tired and stressed like till the strain. We had, for example, experience in Italy, where experienced a problem with the person that has mental problems, because it's not simple for people with depression or weak peoples from with different problems from COVID to face the problem in this moment. This has an effect also on job activities and performance, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess, and I'll combine this, Linda, it's the mental health issue. We've also got Michael Gibbs on the line, and his question is about the fear that people who are being laid off and people who are feeling remote, I guess the danger is they start to have a grudge against the company. So we tend to have seen remote working in fairly positive terms so far. Mental health's a big issue. Also the dangers that these people may not be feeling great about the world, or about companies, and also their families. We don't know the people they're living with, whether they can be trusted.
Absolutely true. Yeah, you make two excellent points there. If you are working remote, you have to be able to work in a secure space, depending on what you do, obviously. But when we do get back to normal, and we keep talking about this like it's going to be some magical time that all of a sudden, you know, the world goes back to normal, I think it's going to be a much slower curve than that, actually. We are seeing, at least here in the United States, an uptick in domestic violence cases. Not quite sure yet if that's because people are home more or because there's really nowhere to go. That kind of remains to be seen. As far as workplace violence, that's absolutely a risk and something we need to be prepared for as we get back to normal, for exactly the things that you're talking about. We have, you know, many organizations in the news that are stepping up to help pay their people, but how long is that going to last? And at what point is that going to run out? And not to sound fatalistic, but we have to be realistic about it as well. We can't just continue to pour money into things that aren't going to be sustainable, whether it's an organization or a family or whatever. There has to be a long-term plan. I think we have some good stopgap measures right now, and hopefully this does, you know, come back around to what we would call normal very quickly, because I think the longer it goes, the longer we have, the more of a risk that we run that the entire society will shift, exactly as you said, to have either grudges against their employers or even from a broader perspective to any kind of order in general or government. And there may be some pretty significant repercussions from the personal safety side as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, let's come to you. This has been presented generally. When you look at the discussions, remote working is seen as something that's an opportunity. And on one of the calls we had last week, there was a discussion about that's going to be the way going forward. More people are going to work from home, almost as an unqualified good. These issues, are you seeing these sorts of problems cropping up? And do you see the dangers down the road in that?
Well, I think if I can just pick up the point that was mentioned earlier, I think what is critical for the well-being of staff is maintaining their morale, and that is achieved through regular contact and support by their managers and their organizations. I do believe that when we come through the other side of this, and I do agree with Linda, I think it may be a phased return, is that it will actually present organizations with the opportunity to review, do all roles need to be office-based in the future? Or can they be a combination between office and remote working? Not all roles can be undertaken remotely, and there'll be some that can and some that can't. But I do believe there's been a huge increase in the adoption of technology for organizations to connect with their remote workers and employees to connect with each other. And I think that will change the way we operate in the future. But I think it's just accelerated the adoption of technology in business.
Samuele, in Italy, where of course you've had a greater exposure to these issues more generally, what is the view about how the security sector will relate to business going forward. To follow Dave's point, is there a sense in which this home working has got so much potential that it's going to take over the way that businesses run, or are people aching to get back to work?
Samuel's on mute.
Samuel, can you hear?
Yeah, yes, I can hear. Thank you. People want to back home, want to back out of houses, they want to back to job, because the perception is to work and to stay in a virtual life. I feel that people want to back to the desk, to want to back to have a non-virtual meeting with colleagues and with the job. I agree with Mike that it's a great opportunity to develop more technologies on networking, and this is a big. But the actual situation is a big social and working challenge for this. But to be fair, I want to back to reality and to work more directly. This is a situation that can show how smart working is not only agile working, but people now are facing also the other part, the dark side of the medal.
Yeah, okay. Linda, on this point, you mentioned in your opening statement virtual communities, virtual support. And I guess that seems a good idea. I just wonder how easy it is in practice to create those virtual networks. I mean, once people are out of sight, there's a tendency to let them get on with it. It takes a real effort, doesn't it, to make this happen?
It does, absolutely. It's much more effort. And to others' point, I think the adoption of technology is going to assist with that. But we are so used to that human-to-human connection. You know, we most of us need, to Samuel's point, we need that balance of having a workplace and also having strong social connections, family and friends. And this situation has kind of forced us to focus more on the family and friends part of it, and society, and less on work, because it's different. I keep saying, when we come to the other side of that, it is teaching us new skills, at least for some people. And I think there's a mix of people out there. There's some that can do this successfully, and like any other leadership skill, it's something that has to be taught to others. Others are not as successful at it. I know the folks that I interact with on a regular basis, about half of them are very adept to technology and have no trouble staying in touch and communicate just like we were if we were face to face. And then the other half have just gone off into who knows where, and they're probably too stressed, quite frankly, to worry about it right now, that they're not, either haven't adopted the technology or they're not willing to learn. So I think that you're going to see a culling of skills. Like any other challenge, the ones that have the skill sets are the ones that are going to go on and actually do well on the other side of this situation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. Christopher Cope has put a question earlier on, which I've been waiting for now to get to, because I wanted to get some context behind it. And he asked a question about business continuity planning, and in your different ways, you all mentioned that, you in particular, Dave Tyson. But the question is, do you feel that business continuity planning is suffering from a lack of imagination? Is planning where it exists being driven by a checklist of common impacts, rather generally looking at risks and mitigations? Dave, you spoke to this point in your opening statement, and the way that I sort of listened to that and interpreted it, thinking, goodness me, there is a highly specialised world where people have been the sort of the essence of security found to be wanting. Your thoughts?
Well, Martin, I think what this has done is exposed the nerve that has been part of the business continuity, and in some ways the physical security problem for many years, which has been a complete lack of strategy. What we see is risk assessment, and we see prioritization, and we see protection. But what we haven't seen is really integrated business strategy being widely adopted across the industry, but at the corporate level. And so often what you end up with is you end up gaps. And what we were seeing here are gaps, right? The business continuity plan, lacks imagination. Very true in many ways, because you end up with these checklist approaches, which is, here's what the methodology says I need to work on, which is I've got to go conduct a business impact assessment. And as long as I do a reasonably good job, I've ticked the box. And here what we see now is, what are the business impacts when it gets real? And I think that is the first piece of this. And so if anything coming out of this, I think that we're going to have to start taking strategy for the security and continuity sides of the business very, very seriously. Because when we start talking about it from the perspective of what are the integration points between technology and people and the process, and really look at where do we want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, as our businesses change. On top of that, what happens if? I think that we've redefined that with this crisis.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, I mean, in the world of business travel, business risks, of course, you've had the problem about getting people home and requiring people to operate in very difficult environments. In your view, how has this business continuity stood up to the test of the COVID-19 experience?
I think it's a very good challenge in this side of our job. Personally, I think that crisis management is preparedness, and of course, during these days, also we have the need to have people in the same room to face and to contrast the crisis. So, for example, here I can find a good help in crisis management tools that to create virtual rooms and virtual dashboards to give a task to people and have a prompt reaction from the local focal points we have on the ground. We had to manage a lot in this way to have people back to Italy. Because, for example, I am thinking about India these days. I had to have back people and to decide very, very, very quickly during nighttime. In this way, regarding this, to answer your question, for crisis management, technology is a very good support because it can keep people joined and in a minute. That's a good step forward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be punchy because we're getting near the end here. Mike, let me come to you with a question from Brian Sims, who's asked whether COVID-19 could push the industry further down the line of convergence, bringing the various elements of the organization together. The idea being, of course, that this is forcing a change, which is good for security anyway. Your thoughts?
I think that's a very valid question, and I think it will help in terms of bringing both physical and technology solutions together. And I think what that will enable to deliver is, when we come out of the other side, is an enhanced service for customers. So I do believe previously there was sometimes a resistance to adopt technology to support some of the other solutions, and there were various organizations that were progressed in that area. This has driven all organizations to look at, how can they utilize technology to enable them to deliver an equivalent or enhanced service. And I think that will maintain as we come out of the other end of this.
It's impossible to have the word of convergence on the agenda and not invite Dave Tyson to at least make comment. I'm going to ask you to be fairly quick, but you've championed this for many a year now. Does COVID-19 experience and coping well spell support for convergence?
Yeah, I don't think it gives us anything that we didn't have before, Martin. At the end of the day, the question of is there a business case for it? I mean, certainly at the risk management level, this just shows, as I said, this exposes nerves between the functions. And I hope that the lessons learned that come out of this are that, hey, we need to do more of this. We need to be closer. We need to put our strategy together. From a technological perspective, we haven't moved the bar too far yet. So while we see progress, it still continues to be incremental.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask one final question to each of you. It's inspired by James Willison, himself a convergence supporter, I might add. A different question here. If I could just come to each of you and ask for your top tips about thinking about security, working from home, and how we can make a better job of it. It alludes to the final point. What does security practice look like? Key things that we can do from here. Linda, your first thoughts. It could be succinct if you wouldn't mind.
I think the main things that we can do is to ensure that we're in constant communication with our organizations and our clients, and keep security on the forefront, and not allow this kind of frenetic state that we're in right now to continue. First of all, it's not healthy for anybody. But back to today's point, we're kind of working in reactive mode right now. Is just take a step back and take some of the what worked and what didn't, so that we can put that into more of a strategic plan. So, we as security professionals and emergency management and business continuity coming along with that, this is kind of what we plan for, but never anything to this extent. So it's a matter of kind of sticking to what's working right now without allowing too many risks, allowing the operation to continue and still do business. But we need to continue, as we always would, as that agitator, if you will, to point out the risks and help to mitigate those risks so that the business can still keep going forward, or at least some segment of the operation. So I guess the message there is to kind of stay the course and use this as an opportunity to have a better plan on the other side, and actually really focus on business continuity and continuity of operations going forward.
Thank you. Mike, I'm going to ask you just for sort of 30 seconds, key tips, key thoughts about working from home.
Okay, I think the key thing is for organisations to have very clear guidelines for their employees on remote working, to also provide sufficient levels of support and to enable them to adapt to the new environment. And a major focus is on staff morale and staying in regular contacts so they don't feel isolated.
Mike, thank you. Dave, key tips, again, if I wouldn't mind, just in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I would just say that we have to be aware that the risk for the home worker is going to continue to ramp up and get worse, not better. And they have to be really aware. We've seen a really big increase in letters going out to employees or people at home randomly saying you've been terminated, you've lost your job, click on this link to get your package. Just heartless attacks, and those are going to continue. And people at home have to be aware that the bad guys will continue to ramp up the intensity of the attack, because they know the person they're attacking is at a lower state.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing we do need to remember, of course, is that offenders are always looking for opportunities, and they certainly will see something in a crisis like this. Samuele, the last comment from you, because I want to give it to Italy, so to speak, because we're acutely aware that Italy has suffered immeasurably from this. Just your thoughts about lessons learned for how we might do security better in the context of remote working.
Yes, I think that the big lesson learned is to be more prepared about agile working and smart working. So until 20 days ago, smart working was seen as something for 1-2 person in the company. Today, we are completely aware that we are in a situation, and the situation come back again. So next time, and everybody has to be secured tools to work. So everybody has to have a VPN, everybody has to have a crypto solution for transferring information. Everybody has to have a specific layer of data access based on the need to know. So imagine, like, for example, top managers. Everybody of these guys has access to every information, but not everybody of them has skills on IT security, on capability in managing different type of technology. So preparation is the key, I think.
Thank you so much, and what a good final word from you. Everybody around the world, thank you very much indeed for joining on our webinar. Some absolutely insightful insights. That's actually, I would say this unbiased, the best discussion I've seen on this topic, and I've been listening to a lot in order to prepare, to be absolutely honest. And that comes from having expert speakers speaking honestly and candidly from around the world. You will be able to watch this and recommend it to others. It'll be on our YouTube channel, Security and Crime. It will also be on our OSPA's website. So please take an opportunity to go and to recommend that to others. And I will be doing a blog on summarising some of the main findings that have coming out of this. What we will also be doing is all over again, another webinar on Thursday. What are the most recent crime trends and what are the implications for security? And on that, I've invited some of the leading criminologists from around the world, quite literally the leading criminologists from around the world, to debate not just what crimes are happening, not the ones that you'll see in official statistics, but the ones that they are researching and understanding going on, and what the implications for security will be. So thank you very much indeed for your interest, for your engagement. Especially thank you to the panel. Thank you to all the questions. Thank you to my team for their support. We'll see you on Thursday, I hope. In the meantime, do send us any ideas or thought you have about future webinars. Most importantly, stay safe.